Alright, Travis Wayne Goodsill. I think I'm ready to start. And we're not going to start with Baby Moses, although that would be cool because, Disney Plus did the Mandalorian with Baby Yoda. We'll get to Baby Moses. The first subject we're going to talk about is skipping ahead to what the Messiah, what languages the Messiah is supposed to know. And I know that can be frustrating when watching a movie and you're watching the climax scene at the beginning of the movie. And then after you think the protagonist is about to die or is caught or whatever, and then the screen fades to black and it shows the words some period of time previously, and you just throw up your hands and you go, they spoiled the ending. But it's necessary for this lecture that you understand the languages first and foremost, in order to understand why I'm taking you through the different cultures as we go through the scriptures. And so as we understand what the Book of Mormon says, that the scriptures are a type and shadow of the Messiah, now you should be able to understand how the Jews identify Moses as the type and shadow of the Messiah whom they are waiting for. When the Jews were able to occupy Israel after World War II with the 7-Day War, many Jews thought, is this it? Is the Messiah coming now? Are we going to be ordered to rebuild the Temple of David? Which was technically the Temple of Solomon, because Solomon was the one who built the temple, not King David. And have a restoration of the kingdom of David. But it's going on 100 years, and the Jews are still waiting. But then comes Trump, as he puts the American embassy in Jerusalem because of his son-in-law, Jared, married to his favorite child, Ivanka, and so Trump fools the Jews into thinking, hey, this might be it. The only drawback is that he's got a Christian mindset, thanks to Vice President Pence and the Chinese fanatical religious group, in that they want to destroy Jerusalem because of the gospel prophecy, even Revelation prophecy, of Jesus coming a second time in Jerusalem as it's being destroyed to stop the war. And so Jews should not be all that excited that an American president is pretending to be on their side. But we're not going to get into that, or at least here at the front. We must then go to Exodus chapter 1 to understand the languages that this Messiah is supposed to know. And it's a new book, and so they list the names of the children of Israel which came into Egypt, which is kind of misleading because Canaan was also Egypt, So they didn't really come into Egypt. They were already in Egypt. And that's an error on the author of the Torah. Let's see. For Joseph was in Egypt already. And verse 6, and Joseph died, and all his brethren, and all that generation. That is a key verse to keep in mind. Joseph died. Now remember, I'm speaking only to Mormons. Joseph died, and his brethren, and all that generation. And a new king over Egypt, in verse 8, did not know Joseph, did not know the origins of Joseph and the children of Israel. Are you catching on yet, Mormons? Because we got a long way to go. And this new king put the children of Israel into bondage. And taskmasters, and then we have the anacronyms of the cities of Pithom and Ramses, and that's where everybody thinks it's Ramses II, when no, it was not Ramses II. But they were made slaves in Egypt, the children of Israel. And they're in bondage, brick and mortar. Okay, 15, the king of Egypt spake to the Hebrew midwives, of which the name of the one was Shiphrah, and the name of the other Puah. And he said, when ye do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew women, and see them upon the stools, if it be a son, then ye shall kill him. Familiar with any other stories about the death of children? That's right, Jesus in the Gospels. That's why Matthew is trying to tell the story as if the prophecies were being fulfilled. Moses is a type and shadow of the Messiah. And like I said in the introduction, the Jews do not recognize the Jesus character of the Gospels because he dies. The Messiah is not supposed to die. He's a full mortal, but is able to restore the kingdom of David on the earth, not in heaven. They already have a God in heaven. And so for the Jews, this is something that's going to happen as the Messiah is born. And we'll get to that part in this lecture. Not in this series, because we're talking about languages. And so what you see here is Egyptian and Hebrew. As Moses is born, and they have to cause him to escape. And in chapter 2 of the house of Levi took to wife a daughter of Levi, because they had to stick with their own tribe. Not too dissimilar from Mormons having to marry Mormons. And the woman conceived and bare a son. And this is where the ark comes in, but we're not talking about baby Moses. And then in verse 5, it is mistranslated. It's not daughter, it's the Hebrew word for house. So the house of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her maidens, servants, walked along by the river's side, and when she saw the ark made the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. And this is one of the Hebrew children. And then said his sister to Pharaoh's house. And if you are confused as to why I'm saying house, it's because in Egyptian, house of Pharaoh refers to the queen. A daughter of Pharaoh is never permitted to raise a child all by herself without a husband. And so what this is Pharaoh's wife, a queen, because Pharaoh had lots of wives, just in case the first wife, the birthright blessing wife, does not give birth to a son to be the heir to the throne, or if the male heirs through that wife die. He then has other women as backups. This is important in the type and shadow that we're looking for, but we're only looking for Egyptian. And so, let's see. So Moses is a Hebrew child raised by the Egyptians. And so what the Jews should be looking for is someone who knows Egyptian and who knows Hebrew in the languages. They may get confused in thinking that they need to look to an Egyptian who knows Hebrew, but that's not correct. It's not the land of Egypt anymore. Egypt is a type and shadow of the actual land of the future Messiah. That's why certain Jews, when America was opening up, that they thought America was going to be the land for the New Jerusalem, as well as certain other characters, which we'll cover in this lecture. So now, in the Book of Mormon, in 1 Nephi, chapter 1, verse 2, Yea, I, Nephi speaking, make a record in the language of my father, which consists of the learning of the Jews, those who used Hebrew, and the language of the Egyptians. Wow. So there you have the Book of Mormon already setting up the scenario of who the Messiah is supposed to be in regards to the languages he's supposed to know. Lehi and Nephi are the ones that are a type and shadow of this last days Messiah. They know Egyptian, they know Hebrew, and we can confirm that as we go into I can't pause, so you'll just have to bear with me. Reformed Egyptian. Okay. Mormon, chapter 9. Verse 32. And now behold, we have written this record according to our knowledge, in the characters which are called among us the Reformed Egyptian, having been handed down and altered by us according to our manner of speech. And if our plates had been sufficiently large, in verse 33, we should have written in Hebrew. See what they're doing here? But the Hebrew hath been altered by us also, and if we could have written in Hebrew, behold, ye would have had no imperfection in our record. The Book of Mormon is a type and shadow of the Messiah as well. And it's no surprise and should be no shock to Mormons, even though you've never even considered it. What languages did Joseph Smith supposedly know, or was he learning? In 1835, he had sent for Hebrew and English grammars, Greek and English grammars, and they tried to find a teacher of Hebrew. They had to wait until January to get Rabbi Sykes, whose Egyptian grammar was used, and we know that it was his grammar because in the Book of Abraham, in the explanations of the facsimiles, how did that happen? What's going on? There we go. Yeah. Facsimile number 1, figure number 12. After figure number 10, where Joseph Smith drops the bombshell that every Mormon missed, Abraham in Egypt. For facsimile number 1. Where did facsimile number 1 take place? Ur of the Chaldees. Where is everybody thinking Ur of the Chaldees is? Babylon. Or up in Sumer, as they try to justify it as being someplace else, because it couldn't have been in Ur of Babylon. But Joseph Smith drops the bombshell and dismisses all of those Mormon apologists by saying Abraham has been in Egypt this whole time. But that's not what we're getting to. Rakiang in verse 12. That's Rabbi Sykes' pronunciation for Rakia, as is known in the Masoretic Hebrew text of the Bible. So that's why it's Rakiang, signifying expanse, rather than Rakia. And so those are the two languages that are supposed to be known by this last day's Messiah. And Joseph Smith was trying to learn, as he claimed to translate, the Egyptian papyri and the Hebrew text of the Bible, Genesis 1, verse 1, in his King Follett discourse, or his sermon for the funeral services of King Follett, where he says that the Hebrew text has been translated incorrectly also, not just the English text that we know and understand from Article of Faith number 8. And so Joseph Smith gives a translation of the first 3 words, and he then is dead later that month, or in 2 months. May, June, yeah. So he never got to finish the retranslation of the biblical Hebrew text. He never got to finish the translation of the Abraham papyri. What is the name of the other papyrus that he never got around to, which Oliver Cowdery did make some comments about? The Book of Joseph. He called the one that he had worked on the Book of Abraham. Now there's a reason for this, why the one was Joseph, as I've been trying to emphasize Joseph If you remember in the Book of Mormon, Joseph name father. It doesn't. And the original guys didn't do that. Amos. No, it's in Nephi. I think, yeah, it's in one of the Nephi's. It's when Lehi is talking to his son Joseph. Okay. So, sorry you have to follow along with me as I search for the passages. Probably should have written them down so that I can quickly reference them. But I'm somewhat winging it. Let's see. Joseph in Egypt. Prophesies of Joseph Smith, so knew right where it was. Chapter 3 of 2nd Nephi. Let's see. Joseph truly testified, saying, "A seer shall the Lord my God raise up, who shall be a choice seer unto the fruit of my loins. And a choice seer will I raise up unto the fruit of my loins, and he shall be esteemed highly among the fruit of my loins." They make a mistake there, as I will get to when we talk about the baby Moses. Let's see. He shall be great like unto Moses, to deliver my people. And Moses will I raise up to deliver. Judah shall write the knowledge of their fathers in the latter days. Okay, come on, let's get to the name. See, notice how he's comparing Joseph to Moses as types and shadows. And behold, my son, after this manner did he prophesy of old. Prophesy. Did I pass it? I apparently passed it. Unless it's in chapter 4. Nope. I passed it. And his name shall be called after me. Verse 15. And it shall be after the name of his father. That's where they indicate that Joseph Smith Jr. is supposed to be this last day's type and shadow of the Messiah. And you guys, we haven't been taught that, have we? But that's what Joseph was doing. He was proclaiming certain things, like the obtaining of the plates and the going to meet with what was originally Nephi, until Willard Richards was ordered by Brigham Young to change the name to Moroni, to get the plates. And those were on the Feast of Tabernacles of the Jews. The Passover was when Joseph Smith was visited by Elijah in the Kirtland Temple, where Elijah gave him the keys of this seership. Joseph, seer. Elijah, seer keys of the priesthood. Not a coincidence. And the keys to seal. And on Passover, when the Jews celebrate by having an empty place setting at their table for the coming return in the latter days of Elijah, who would be able to explain the questions brought up in the Torah from the confusion that they caused. And he also would be establishing restoring the kingdom, building the temple, building up again the temple, etc., etc. And so here we have Joseph Smith Jr. fulfilling, as he's attempting to, fulfill speaking Egyptian and Hebrew, translating actually, and wanting to restore the kingdom, restore the temple, having certain events fall on Jewish holy days, and being a type and shadow of Joseph of Egypt and of Moses. Joseph Smith was trying to set himself up as the last days Messiah. And we weren't told about this. That was sort of left out. But that's exactly what the Book of Mormon is talking about and what Joseph Smith was doing. The only problem is, that's right, he was murdered. He did not establish the kingdom, restore the kingdom. He did not restore the temple. He came close, but was unsuccessful. And then you may think, well, Brigham Young did it. We're going to get to that. But that's why Joseph Smith is not the Messiah. But he tried to be. He thought he was. And at his death, he was telling people what to look for in the signs in the heavens. My goodness, this language thing took far longer than I thought. We still need to cover one more part. That's Ezekiel prophecy in 37. All you Mormons should know this by heart. Ezekiel 37. Alright. The word of the Lord came unto me, saying, and now we go into 16, Moreover, thou son of man. Notice son of man. Jesus Christ talks about son of man. John in Revelation talks of son of man. That's a mortal. That is not a half god. That would be son of God if it were half god. This is son of man. He's referring to Ezekiel in the prophecy here, but it's about the last days Messiah when we get to verse 24. And David, my servant, shall be king over them, and they shall have one shepherd. This is right after, take thee one stick, and write upon it for Judah, and for the children of Israel, his companions. Then take another stick, and write upon it for Joseph. The book of Joseph, from the Egyptian papyri. Joseph Smith is explaining here that the book of Joseph, the stick of Joseph in Ezekiel, is from the Egyptian documents. And the stick of Judah, as we all know, is Hebrew. Egyptian and Hebrew. The Egyptian is to correct the Hebrew text. So Egyptian corrects Hebrew. The stick of Ephraim, who became the birthright son over Manasseh, even though Manasseh came out of the womb first as a twin, for all of the house of Israel, his companions, and join them one to another into one stick, and they shall become one in thine hand. The Book of Mormon is not the stick of Joseph, even though it was written in Egyptian, because it does not contain the text of the stick of Judah. It doesn't correct the stick of Judah, the Torah. And I don't understand why Mormons would think that. I don't understand why you do. Because we need to go into the brass plates description. Start with Mosiah, chapter 1, verse 4. For were it not possible that our father Lehi could have remembered all these things to have taught them to his children, except it were for the help of these plates, referring to the brass plates. For he, having been taught in the language of the Egyptians, therefore he could read these engravings, and teach them to his children, that thereby they could teach them to their children, and so fulfilling the commandments of God, even down to this present time. Brass plates were in Egyptian. Now let's go to the description. 3b gets us right to 1 Nephi chapter 3. That's the wrong one. This is when they're trying to get it. Set me up on the wrong footnote. Okay. So verse 4. Let's see, wait a minute. I also knew, no, this is where he kills Laban. Alright. There we go. Verse 5, or chapter 5. And after they had given thanks, which was a sacrificial thank offering unto God of Israel, my father Lehi took the records, brass plates, which were engraven upon the plates of brass, and he did search them from the beginning. Now pay attention, Mormons. This is why the Book of Mormon is not the fulfillment of the Ezekiel prophecy. It is not the stick of Joseph. The brass plates are the type and shadow of the Book of Joseph merged with the Book of Judah. And he beheld that they did contain the 5 books of Moses. It's an Egyptian record containing the 5 books of Moses, which gave an account of the creation of the world, and also of Adam and Eve, who are our first parents, and also a record of the Jews. So it's the stick of Judah, from the beginning even down to the commencement of the reign of Zedekiah, king of Judah. So stick of Judah in Egyptian. And also the prophecies of the holy prophets from the beginning even down to the commencement of the reign of Zedekiah, and also many prophecies which have been spoken by the mouth of Jeremiah. And it came to pass, here it is, that my father Lehi also found upon the plates of brass a genealogy of his fathers. So now it's got a genealogy. Then it ties into Lehi. Wherefore Lehi knew that he was a descendant of Joseph. It's also the stick of Joseph in Egyptian with the stick of Judah, correcting and fulfilling it, because it is larger than our current Tanakh, which is the full Old Testament of the Jews, except that Joseph Smith's version of the Old Testament contained the Apocrypha, as Spencer W. Kimball refused to put it in when they made their footnotes back in 79 and 81. He purposely left out the Apocrypha. And so it's only Catholics that kept the Apocrypha. The Jews don't have the Apocrypha, which is strange because the Apocrypha contains the reason why they celebrate Hanukkah. But anyway, and so there you go. It's a good thing I'm doing these in segments. This was a long one. Far longer than I expected. But I hope you understand now that what you're looking for is someone who knows Egyptian and who knows Hebrew. And he knows other languages too, because what Nephi talks about in 1 Nephi chapter 1 verse 4 or 2, 3, is that it's also a symbolism of the latter days, because it's not an Egyptian and it's not a Jew who is in Egypt. So it's that particular language of the nation he is born into and the learning of the religious organization that he is born into. And thus, you can now understand that he knows several languages: Egyptian, Hebrew, the national origin, and he understands the national origin's language with the religion that he grows up in. And I think that covers it for languages. If there's more, I'll bring them up in the future lectures, which this is all of a sudden turned into a bigger event than I expected. And I was supposed to be writing notes for this whole process, and I forgot to do that. Alright, so as I'm saving this and uploading it, I'll be trying to recall what it was I was talking about and put them on the notes.